to this week's episode of the Star Wars Book Club reading of Aftermath Life Debt by Chuck Wendig, where we're taking a couple chapters at a time and kind of breaking down the book. If you are unfamiliar with the series, please click on the thing and it'll take you back to the beginning. And if you are interested in joining us from the first book, which would just be Aftermath, you can also click on this playlist and it will take you through the series. Today we're going to be talking about chapters 12, 13, and 14. No interludes today. Quite a few things happen and I'm really excited to get into it. Mostly, we have some big plot points kind of coming to fruition. So, chapter 12, we see for the first time the Shadow Council. It's Rex's grand scheme to run the Empire. It includes Daddy Hux, that is Brendel Hux, who is the father of Armitage Hux, who is the Hux that we see in the sequel trilogy. He has been liberated, shall we say, from a planet by Mercutio Swift, along with his son. And he is sitting around, and basically what's going on in this chapter is Sloane is having a very awkward dinner with a bunch of people, and she is feeling very much like the most ignored person in the room. So, you have several kind of old guard, gruff folk who know how to run their empire and stuff, and it's like them and her and the Imperial propaganda guy, who'd probably be the youngest one in the room. Sloane's playing this game of she wants to be respected in the room, and she's not being respected outright for just having access to the fleet that she does. A lot of the beginning is kind of her trying to get conversations started, playing conversations, trying to prove who she is. Ultimately, it is the propaganda guy, Ferric, who really gets the conversation going, and he kind of builds to this dramatic crescendo. And who doesn't like to show up during dramatic crescendos, other than, of course, Mr. Rax. So Rax shows up, and he's like, yes, welcome, this is the time to appreciate my grand plan. And he basically goes into how his plan to take back the galaxy is that there's actually more fleets, that the fleet they're at is not the only fleet, and that he has little mini fleets hidden throughout the galaxy. And Sloane freaks out because she's like, dude, you didn't tell me, like, I'm supposed to be a part of this, and she's all mad. But before she can really react, Rax is like, yo, Sloane and I, we were totally in it together. It's super awesome. And Sloane is kind of stuck in this rock, in this hard place of if she denies that she knew anything about these fleets and she calls Rax out for the liar and the manipulator that he is, she looks weak. If she agrees to go along with it, she continues to be more and more indebted to Rax. And this is kind of this running theme of what the situation that Sloane's in and why she's rushing so hard to kind of take control back of the fleet. Because she's basically being doted on by this mysterious figure who wants her as his second in command, and she doesn't really know why, and she doesn't really like having power that she didn't earn, and just creates all these really complicated emotions for her. The power dynamic in this chapter was very interesting to me because it starts out very clearly of Sloane wants the admiration and the respect of everybody in the room, and she's not convincing them that she should have it based on the interactions, and then Rax gives it to her. And even though she's technically done all these things where she should feel as if that respect is owed, the way she gets that admiration via Rax shows her that she didn't really earn it, and so she now has what she wants, but not for the reasons that she wanted it, so she doesn't really want it, and Sloane's really just dealing with a lot. With chapter 13, we jump back over to the good guys side of the book. We have Nora and Commodore Agate, and they're basically discussing the state of the Republic, the Star Destroyer that had shown up to attack Nora, and Wedge is in shambles, and the battle is seemingly won. And they're basically having this kind of heart-to-heart discussion about the nature of things. Agate says something that really hits Nora pretty hard, which is that Agate doesn't want unrepentant soldiers, which were her words. She wants soldiers that are actually going to feel a little bit bad about the soldiering that they're doing. Not to the point, where they feel so overcome with guilt that they'd be guilt-stricken, or that it would hurt them necessarily, but she wants soldiers that don't want to kill. And that she thinks that kind of creates the difference between the Empire and them, to the point where she would rather lose the war but keep themselves as opposed to lose themselves and win the war. And it really hits Nora, and I think it really hits Nora because of some of the stuff I'd commented on, especially in Aftermath Prime. Nora's been doing a lot of iffy stuff, right? If you remember at the end of the first Aftermath book, she manipulated that propaganda video, made Timon kind of like fake die on camera. And I kind of talked about how that's actually exactly what the Empire was doing at the start of this book, and how not too dissimilar they were. And I think that unknowingly, Agate is kind of challenging Nora for how she's been playing the game. And it's not that unusual or unfair, maybe. You know, Nora's doing what she has to do. She's operating in a gray area. She's not military. They're doing these kind of like covert ops type of things. And so inevitably that means Nora's probably going to have to get her hands dirty a little bit more often. But I think it's a check for Nora to realize that her mentality and how she's been treating these things might be a little bit off. That she's been, we're the good guys, so what we're doing is good. And Agate's kind of like, well, no, we're the good guys. Sometimes we do bad things, but we have to be aware that they're bad things or we stop being the good guys. And it's really the first person that's able to check Nora outside of, like, say, somebody like Timon who's questioning her on her ability to be a mom. This is Nora really kind of being questioned as a soldier and kind of getting hit from the other end of things. It reminded me quite a bit of Rebels, where for several episodes there was this idea of it's more important of how you fight than it is that you fight. Towards the end of the chapter, Nora and Wedge hang out, and Wedge awkwardly kind of brings up that he had asked her for something to drink, and then they kiss. So that's a thing that's also happening now. And then they go hit up a bar, and they kind of have this awkward conversation because Wedge is like, I thought you'd be mad at me because I had to kind of like rat you out. Oh, because Agate knows about the mission to go save Han, of course. And Nora's like, nah, I'd rather kiss you than be mad. And then that's kind of how the story goes from there. But at this point is when I realized, man, we're like halfway through this book. Well, not quite. We're like in the first third of this book, and we still haven't gotten to the bit with Han Solo and Kashyyyk. And I am remembering now, but I forgot how long it actually takes to get to that part of the book. Chapter 14. This time we actually get the story from Rax's perspective. I'm trying to think, other than the prologue, I'm not sure we've actually had any passage in this book that's from Rax's perspective, so it's kind of cool to see that. And what's really interesting is it's a scene, you know, where he's listening to music, and he senses somebody kind of coming up on him, but he doesn't want that person to interrupt. And it kind of gets into why music is so important to Rax, that Rax didn't have music at all for the first 12 years of his life, and it made such an impact on him once he heard it. And I think that adds a lot to the character. You know, it's not just that he's this eccentric kind of privileged whoever listening to music and treating, like, you know, not interrupting the radio is a big deal, but that music is actually something that would be so important to him at his core because it was something he didn't have for so long. And it kind of explains why he would care so much about narrative in the story, because presumably he wouldn't have had access to stories quite as much either. And that it's kind of finding art at that point in your life when you really had nothing else is an intense experience for him. It is at this point that we learn that Ada Wright, the aide and right hand of Sloane, is in fact in lead with Rax. So all of this time Sloane has been going to Ada as the only person she could trust to try to get around Rax's back. And of course, Ada is busy getting around Rax's back, so that's pretty interesting. Though it's a little bit, at least in this chapter, it's a little bit gray how much of this is really something that Ada wants and maybe might be something more that's kind of being put on her. I don't actually remember the answer to that question. It's just ambiguous in this chapter, so that's something we'll figure out as we go forward. What we do know is that Ada is conflicted about betraying Sloane, but it is one of those kind of, she's doing what she thinks is better for the Empire sort of things. After that, we go back to Sloane, who was supposed to have a meeting with Rax, but kind of gave him the cold shoulder, and Rax understands this because she's really mad at him. Sloane talks about how she knows that Rax is, of course, the operator, but what she's really, really mad about is not only is he just kind of feeding fringe information to try to foster a relationship with somebody from the New Republic, but he's actually using that information to kill off rivals. So what we learn is the Star Destroyer that just so happened to be there when Nora and Wedge found the probe droid was actually sent there by Rex. The captain of that Star Destroyer was somebody who was going to be in league with a rival to Sloane, and that Rex was basically getting rid of the weakest link. And Sloane is getting really, really tired of this kind of nonsense. Sloane, of course, would rather resources be reallocated, rather problematic people be removed, but like keep whole crews. But she's just kind of like this, Rex is destroying whole ships that would be useful and whole crews when the Empire needs people, and she's really not sure if Rex even knows what's best for the Empire. So she's going to run off and get to, she's trying to follow up the lead that she found in the pit, the Coruscant library thing. She wants to follow up that lead, and she goes to do it, and literally as she opens her door, Ferric, the propaganda guy, is there, and he's like, here's things and things and things and things, and she gets pulled right back into bureaucracy. She realized that she's kind of stuck in this muck, that and a lot of this is probably Rax's doing, but that she's just being kept too busy with paperwork to really be able to move forward in what she needs to do. And it kind of keeps going into this theme with Sloane, where Sloane is constantly about wanting to be in power and having done all the things that she needs to do to get power, but inevitably she's also being fed all these other things that kind of keep her from having real power, from being anything other than a figurehead. And she has this complicated relationship with this guy who's giving her power but not for the right reasons. And it's something really interesting to kind of revisit and find her motivations, because anybody else, any other normal Imperial bureaucrat would love to be in Sloane's position. But Sloane is the one who wants actual power, actual authority, and actually wants to earn it. And of course, she's being driven crazy. All right, that's it for this week. Next week, we are going to discuss the Interlude. It's an interlude on Takodana, which of course means it's going to be about Maz Kanata. And then we're going to read chapter 15. What I didn't realize is we're already at part 3. Part 2 was a very short part. So while it's really not a whole lot of reading to just do an interlude and a chapter, I want to do just those two things, because as I remember, this is one of the best interludes in the 3 books, and I want to spend some time on it. And then usually the last chapter in a part is one of those, like, we visit everybody and there'll be a lot to talk about. So we'll just keep it to those 2 chapters for now. So we'll discuss those next week. A few housekeeping notes for those of you who are kind of following the series as it goes on. I am releasing this video, of course, today is a Monday. The schedule is going to be a little bit weird. We're going to settle in the next week or so. We're going to kind of go back to a regular weekly schedule. So next week, next week's video will go up either on a Monday or a Tuesday. I'm not sure yet if it will be Monday or Tuesday, but just kind of keep an eye out on one of those 2 days. Please leave me a comment on what you thought of these chapters, what you think about the story so far. If you're not already, please follow us on Twitter at Porthaven Forums. Visit port-haven.com for even more, and please consider joining our Discord, where we have lots of fun Star Wars conversations. And I will talk to you guys next week.